Hello, everyone. Welcome to the ItCast Real Talk on Sex. I am your host, Nika Sherelle. The ItCast is our community outreach podcast that increases diversity in conversations on health and sexuality. Through this work, we're creating a world where all people feel loved, honored, and respected. This episode is brought to you by the House of Sherelle. You can check out our online store at triggerhappytoy.com. We are also brought to you by our partner organization, the International Institute for Sexual Empowerment, a 501c3 nonprofit that creates a safe space to talk about sex. You can check out any of our upcoming events at our website, nikasherelles.com. And if you would like to have one-on-one coaching with me, please visit my Calendly to book a free connection session. Ask us anything. We want to hear from you. And you can click the link in the comments to have your questions answered on the show, get access to our bonus content on Patreon, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and share with your community. Thank you so much. So this week's topic is Real Talk on Sex Positive Parenting. And today in the booth, we have Jet-Setting Jasmine. Jasmine is a psychotherapist with a strong emphasis on intimacy post-injury or illness. She is the owner and lead therapist of Blue Pearl Therapy. Jasmine co-owns with partner King Noire award-winning Royal Fetish Films, and together have over 20 years of experience as adult entertainers, directors, and producers. The duo love the arts, film, and sex education are combined. The love of arts, film, and sex education are combined to produce erotica that stimulates and engages the audience to explore their sexual boundaries. Their work on the decolonization of sex and porn and politics has been featured in Huffington Post, Rolling Stones, Paper Magazine, Vice, Playboy, Forbes, Cosmopolitan, BBC, Psychology Today, and much, much more. Jasmine, join us on the show. And I am going to figure this out.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's so good to see you again. How are you today?
Doing well today. Yeah.
All right. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and why you chose to do the show.
So anytime that I can have some time with you is awesome. It was great being here before when I did the sex work panel. And then this is just an opportunity to have some one-on-one time with you and your audience. But specifically this topic that we're talking about today is incredibly important to me. I am a mother of a 22-year-old, a 18-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 6-month-old. My partner and I, King, as you mentioned in my bio, we are raising our children together in this world as sex entertainers and sex educators. And so there's first a lot of desire for us to show up as the example that we model for adults. There's a lot that we have learned as adult entertainers, educators, and just, adult human beings, sexual adult human beings, that we have felt that if we had some different experiences as children, we would have aced this thing as adults a lot sooner, right? And then it's also important for me to take any and all opportunities to present this work to different audiences, because sex workers, and I would go as far as to say sex educators and sex therapists, have a really difficult time being stigmatized by the general public with relationship to, can we parent well? Is our parenting style and our lifestyle safe for children? And so I like to be able to normalize this experience. I like to be able to expand and challenge a lot of the stereotype thoughts about sex positive parenting, specifically from a sex working parent. So yeah, and you offered the opportunity to do that. So here I am.
Absolutely. Oh my God. I love having you on every single time I've worked with you. And you're right, like some one-on-one time. I'm like, we get to go so much deeper in this conversation than we have before. So I'm thrilled. Um, so you're spot on. Like, one of the things you mentioned was the stigma. And what I'm hearing is like disregard and disrespect for the validity of the work. And I think just because it's in an arena that's so taboo and there's so much to get underneath, that we end up like avoiding, pushing it away, shying it down. Like,
Yeah, I don't think that the work that we do is there is ever any space for us to bring our families into. Like it's it's not appropriate, right? Adult entertainment, adult sex education, that is specifically for adults. And so it's very rare that people really get to see us in our comprehensive form as people with families, as people that are going to work to create the same thing that everybody else wants to create for their families: opportunities, comfortable lifestyle, the privilege of good education, and all of these things,
right,
right? So in other forms of work, like let's just say like an actor or an actress, when they win Emmy award, and they go to down the red carpet, they're there with their family. Oftentimes we get to see, right? And it's like we may not see them when they're making their movies, or on the billboard or what have you, but we get to have some interaction with them at these places or spaces. Like, oh yeah, like he was there with his daughter and his wife or what have you. Or when they go and they give a speech and they say, I just want to thank my family for sacrificing blah 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 blah. We see this with folks that are in, let's say, the military or in law enforcement, where you may not see, their family while they're doing the job. It's not sort of a job that you bring your child to, but when they receive their medals of commendation, or as they're ascending the ranks, you see the family present for that. That seems appropriate. In our profession, it's not. I wouldn't want to bring my children to the adult awards. I just like they're
right.
gonna. I love Fetish Con, and it's a part of my community and a part of my like my kink fam, but I don't want to mix the two.
Right.
And because that is okay and that is appropriate, but that disconnect, where there should be a disconnect, also makes a disconnection between us as full human beings, with a comprehensive lifestyle, to our audience. And so it is conversations like this that remind people, like, oh yeah, like they do have a family,
Right.
and yeah, I wouldn't see them, but it doesn't mean that they don't exist. And I think because people sexualize us to the nth degree, and part of sexualizing us, for some reason, that means that you can't have these other things. There's also this like idea that I cannot be an appropriate parent,
Right.
or that somehow, because I've made the decision to do this type of labor with my body, that I cannot make good decisions as a parent. And I think that's totally false. I do see a lot of people that go into sex work to be better parents, to be more present, to be able to make more money, to be more flexible in their hours, to build like to build other businesses that will allow them to continue to be present, and offer a certain afford a certain type of lifestyle and luxury to their families. So there's that. And then there's one other piece that I wanted to share about that, as it's like slowly slipping from my mind. So I'm going to actually turn it back to you.
Okay. Well, I've totally had that happen more than once. So what you were saying though about the parenting aspect is so incredibly true. Like from the inside, I have seen people build careers and build lives and shift things for their family and have more time for their family through these professions versus going to work 40 hours a week every single day, and like, the things that pull you away from your family and don't allow you to be there. So I think it's actually a really excellent point that people often go into sex work to provide better for others. Um,
Mhm, mhm.
yeah, did you want to?
Yeah, no, go ahead. But
But one of the other things that came up as you were talking was like this unfit to be parents. And I remember in one of my workshops, one of the participants actually shared about how, because of the sexuality of their lifestyle, like it's like people cannot know, they cannot find out, it's dangerous because like they could even lose their kids just because they have, like, what do they call them, proclivities. I'll go with that word. I don't like it, but I'll go with it.
Yeah, that is so true. The stigma is so deep and it's so dangerous because of people making these assumptions, right? Um, I like to liken it to, again, I'll do military law, law enforcement. Those are very dangerous jobs that are that are not appropriate for children to be exposed to, right? And those are jobs in which people make some really challenging decisions, if you will, that somehow we have normalized that this person can make, literally life or death situation or decisions for someone else. I'm not even doing that as a sex worker. Like, it's not that deep, right? um and somehow still be able to make good decisions at home, right? We don't although we do see a higher propensity of domestic violence.
Okay, cool.
So, but I'm just talking about perception though,
Yeah.
stat and perception. And I think that is really important. Like, the stats show that there's a higher propensity of domestic violence with people that are in both military and law enforcement. But somehow we do not go in looking to take their children away, right? We don't go in with the perception of that they cannot parent their children based on their job. For sex workers, there may be a higher propensity for people to look into and allegations made towards, unfounded though, that there's discrepancy in our ability to care for our children in a particular way. And so, I really do challenge people to kind of think about how our perceptions have been skewed just based on the taboo nature of sex. The idea that having autonomy and using my body in one way is somehow less respectable, or less has less moral value, or that it takes away my judgment to be able to do that. And I say that to say that some people, even when we talk about sex work as work, I say all the time, some people use their hands, they type all day long. That's how they have chosen to use their body to make money, right? Some people take boxes and put them from here to there. Some people drive, they keep their body in an upright position and they drive as a way to make money. I have chosen to use my body in a particular way to make a living for my family. And so it's, I think when we have these, it forces people to kind of like go like, oh yeah, I am just putting so much weight on sex. Right. And that has to do with your shame and your stigma around sex. It has, because the activity of how I choose to use my body legally to make money is really no different than the way that our bodies are exploited in so many other forms of work.
Yes.
And so my exploit is my choice. And I do think that when you couch it like that and they're like, well, what's the difference? It really is just your feelings about sex. And that's something for you to explore. And then, to suggest that anyone who is a body worker somehow cannot take care of their children, or is not in a good moral position to take care of their children is quite ridiculous. And I want us to really think about sex workers in that way too. I also feel that people don't understand how the sex work industry operates. There's this like seedy idea around it. And it's like, no, like we have testing protocol, we have how we can and where we can produce and who we can produce with and how it's distributed and the legalities of it. It's more structured than this wild, wild west idea that people have that we are just like having sex all the time, anywhere, with no regards for our bodies or for people around us. And that's just the furthest from the truth.
Yeah. Wow. The thing that you pointed out, and I was like, oh my God, was exploitation. Like the exploitation of the body. And you're right,
Mhm.
whether it be sexual, physical,
Yeah,
mental,
yeah.
like there's so many layers where there's actually potentially more exploitation in those spaces. I think
Mhm,
about all of my people who work factory jobs. And
mhm.
like there was a battery factory in Kansas City. And it's like you could get radiation going and making those batteries, but it was the good job that paid.
Which, and if people said, like, how could you make that decision where you could get cancer or you can get hurt? What type of person makes that kind of decision? That person cannot be fit to raise a child. That would no, actually it's quite the opposite. It's like what a sacrifice for your family.
Right, right. So honorable.
Yes, yes, yes.
The other thing that you pointed out was about autonomy of the body and people's personal shame. And getting back to kids, it's like we don't teach kids to have autonomy and
No.
agency
Mhm,
and to know and love their bodies. Like
mhm.
there's all the layers.
Yeah.
So I think that, yeah, we did have a question pop up in the
Oh,
chat, and
okay.
uh I want to pitch this to you. So how soon is too soon to teach children about sexuality?
Mm. So the way that we approach sex positive parenting in our home and the philosophy that we use is that it's never too early. But the way that we introduce it may not be the way that we have like conceptualized sex ed. Because when we think about sex ed, it's usually very pointed to the act of sex, right? Like preventing it or around having children and STIs, STDs, and the actual act of having sex and our reproduction system. The way that we think about it is from a pleasure centered approach, which includes autonomy. Right. So I'll give you an example with the four of my children and how we have approached when to insert teaching about sex and sexuality. For my 22-year-old daughter, I have not always been a sex positive parent. I have not always known this stuff. So those of you that are listening and just like, oh, like she just got it, right from jump, like, no, I think that you need to start as soon as you possibly can
Mhm.
and you'll be better for it. But please do not feel shame or so behind the eight ball that you can't even if you have adult children, it's not too late to start. And I think for my 22-year-olds, like um, that that child maybe started a little bit later than I would have wanted to, but I started probably around, I would say around 5 or 6, and it wasn't great. It wasn't great. It was sort of like just my mother sort of had a no, like anything that has to do with anything about sexual feelings, anything that has to do with your genitalia is just no. And there was no more discussion than no. And
Mm,
that was like so like it was stifling. With my daughter, although I feel like I wasn't that great, I left some room, like even asking what are you doing, why are you doing that, okay, can you do that in there, right? So I wasn't necessarily giving any information, I wasn't providing great education, but I was giving space. And that to me was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I told her she could do that in there. Oh god, am I going to help, like like all of these things. And so that was that, but that was my beginning point. And then slowly, I started to be able to say more things. I started to be able to use things that we were watching on TV where like a boy would have a crush on a girl or something like that, and I would be like, oh, do you have a crush on anybody? And she would be like, like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, I don't know. I remember what that feeling is like. That means yes. And I was like, would you tell me? And she would be like, yeah. I'm like, okay, all right, cool. I'm doing this. I'm doing this, right? The second child, totally different type of child. She was more of a child that I could put a book in front of and I could say,
mhm.
hey, I want you to read like the first couple of pages, and if you have any questions, if you have any questions, ask me. And I realized no questions, no discussion. She read it because I would see the book move around. And then I started to do it a little bit differently with her. I would say, you have to have 3 questions after you read this. And she would find like the most basic things to ask about, but it at least let me know there's some exchange of information. I would send her, as she got a little bit older, I would send her little websites that were specific to like even not even sex so much, but like body, about the body. Tell me if you have any questions about that. I'm going to quiz you on this, right? And we would make it fun. And like I would ask, like very, very silly things, but I knew that she had got the content. So I had to find different ways which each child to introduce. The key thing is that once you start, like I plan to forever be a part of the sexual education and development of my children as long as I live. It is not like you have one conversation and it's done. I always want to be the resource for them. And that resource might even be like, you got to go and listen to this live chat because, or you got to listen to this live show because they're saying some things that I think you should know. It doesn't always have to come from you and your knowledge bank. It can come from you knowing others. Now with the littles, the 6-month-old and the 4-year-old, you would be thinking like, what in the world could you do to like, and why would you? But back to what you said, Nika, about body autonomy. We use anatomically correct words for our children. So that way, when it is time for us to have more involved discussions, it doesn't feel like, oh my gosh, I can't even say that, right? It feels like, oh yeah, like, of course, that's my penis, right? When we let him start to have private time. And he's 4, so we can't exactly like close and lock the door. Like that's not safe. But I can even private time saying, I'm in the bathroom with you, but I'm gonna just be sitting here and you're in earshot, and I can respond immediately if I need to. But go ahead and wash your body from head to toe. And then when you're done, mommy will come in and I will do your second wash. Okay. And so I'm giving privacy. Now he asks for it. Like, no, he says, I need to go to the bathroom and I need privacy. Close the door, but sit right outside the door, he'll say. No, so he's got like, with the baby, people always ask like, oh, maybe I should start when they're like 5 or 6. And I realized we can teach consent from infancy. When I'm holding my little baby and I'm like all in her face, I'm like, so much. And she's like, okay, you want space. You don't want that. So I'm already teaching you that I can respect you at every age and stage that you are. And that is so much bigger than what goes into what hole and like, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Figure that stuff out later. But can we figure out how to talk about our bodies? Can we figure out how to ask where consent starts and stops? Can we actually help our children be able to acknowledge when they're being respected or not respected?
Right.
That part, to me, like that's sex education. The other stuff, there's plenty of stuff out there to show you.
Right. Yes, I love it when you talk about like using the anatomically correct words and things of that nature. It's like, yeah, like we want to talk about those things. It's like it's not about the hush hush. You're talking about it, just throwing that out there. And it makes so much sense to provide children with this experience of like like not having shame at such a young age. I love when you said, I told my daughter she could do that in there. Like that made me so happy because like when I was roughly that age, if somebody told me that was okay, I wouldn't have spent years thinking I was going to go to hell. I was like, oh my God.
Right. Like, and it's not, some people are like, oh, like, should we be encouraging? And like, you know what, we're going to do self-exploration regardless.
Exactly.
Right. With one of my other children, it was, she used to like to walk around the house nude, and like it was fine at the time. I was a single mom. It was just 3 of us, but there was something for me that I was just like, I want this naked child going in my refrigerator. Like, I don't know, like make me feel comfortable. So I was just like, listen, your room, your rules. You can be nude all you want in there. Put some clothes on before you get in my refrigerator, and please wash your hands before and after, right? And so I'm even expressing boundaries,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
where it doesn't have to be like it was with my mother, like no, 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 like we're not going to talk about it, we're not going to do it, nothing, like off limits. It's like, let's have a conversation about this. This doesn't make good sense to me or make me feel comfortable. I have to live here too. So let's talk about where it can work. And so, like now it's funny because now she is has a roommate and is often gone to school. And she talks about like, wow, like some people don't have boundaries around like walking around the house with a towel or what have you. We got to have a conversation about this. And so, she's having conversations with her roommates about when I have company over, although this is our shared home, let's talk about where we can do certain things, when we can do certain things, and it'll make me feel comfortable, my guests feel comfortable, and it'll be better for our living conditions. I'm like, yes, because we've been having this conversation since you were 6.
Exactly. Like that's some instilled agency right there. Like you
Right
know
there.
yourself, you know your boundaries. I mean, boom.
Mhm.
I love it. And like when you talk about your son, the younger one of the younger kids, the idea of allowing them space and privacy and like that level of autonomy is so important. It's like to be able to allow them to learn to trust themselves, to learn
Yeah,
to know themselves.
yeah, it's so beautiful. It's such a difference because like again, your parenting changes over time.
Mhm.
But to hear my oldest children, they are saying the same things that he's saying now. It just took us a little longer to get there because we didn't instill it so early.
Mhm.
But I mean, he says like, I'll give you an example. We had a good family friend over and he was tickling him and he's just like, oh, like, oh, roughing him up. And my son said, that's enough. And our family friend was like, that's enough. Like, no, like just be like the way that adults play. And
Mhm.
my son said, like, no, that's enough. And we go, hey, like we help, we support, we like, he said that's enough. So that's where we're gonna stop at. He was like, oh, my bad, because people are not used to children having that kind of agency.
Right.
And it made us feel so good to hear our son
Mhm.
stand up for himself in that way, and it's like it was all play, and he knew it, but he had enough. And so in our mind it's like, okay, if you could do this in this setting, it helps us even have more confidence in you being able to stand up for yourself in other settings. And even using this, remember when Unc was playing with you in a way that you didn't want to play anymore, and you spoke up for yourself and it stopped? Like, we want to see more of that. And we also want to see that from you with other people,
Mhm.
So when
Exactly.
we can say to him, I said stop. Remember how it feels when somebody doesn't stop, and you see it registering. So not only are we teaching them how to respect boundaries for themselves, but how to respect other people's boundaries as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I really, really, really get that one. Mm. Um, ooh, I'm like, I'm listening to the that's enough part, and I'm like, yeah, it's so easy to just kind of force kids to whatever and not even acknowledge that they're being forced. It's kind of like, oh, it's a kid, like it's a kid. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
right.
Um, and it's so not fair. I think about what you were saying with your youngest daughter and the like, nah, that part. And it reminds me of where it's like, no, 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 give them a hug, it's like, and like to encourage the kids and kind of
Yeah.
force them into this false affection. You know
Yeah.
what that does for your own psychology? Like,
Mhm.
now
Mhm.
I have to do something I don't want to do because it makes someone else happy.
Absolutely. Yeah, we use other approaches to that. I started this with my older girls when we will say, before going into somebody's house or people coming over. I come from the old school, like, like you got to address people when you walk in the house. And I definitely came from the like, go give a hug, that type of thing. And I didn't want that for them.
Mhm.
So we have a discussion before we get into I go, okay, now how are you gonna greet these people when we walk in their house? Right. And my oldest one is just like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy to see them. I can't wait to hug everybody. Okay, that's you. The other one is just like fist bump all day. Or I noticed that she would like trail super close to me. And so it's like, I don't mind giving the hug. I'll give a hug, and I may say something like, make sure you go and speak to everyone. Speak, not hug everyone. And so
Right.
it's stated. The other thing that I think is important too is like, if you're going to be the good sex positive parent um, to not encourage the hugs and the kisses and that type of thing, or to have the discussion where your kids get a moment to sort of think about what they might be asked to do and what they're willing to offer, is that you also have to be willing to stand up for your children, just like we had to do to our family friend, where it was just like, we know you don't mean no harm, we know you're just playing around, but the
Right.
boy said stop, right? And the same thing for my girls when well, yeah, really honestly for all of them, it's like, oh, come and give me a kiss. And I could see, especially on my second daughter's face, it's just like, I don't want to, and I'll be like, she is definitely gonna give you a big old high five, I insert myself, she's gonna give you a big old high five, right? And my daughter be like, yup, and
Boom.
mom saved, right? So we have to be also very, very willing to stand in the gap for our children where other adults might be pushy, and not cave, and like take sort of like, I'd rather somebody be like, oh, she's raising them where they are. Yes, I am. And you could be mad at me, but you're not going to pressure my children. And that like increases the confidence of our children, because now they're saying like, oh, that's a model. Mom spoke up.
Right.
Mom found something witty or whatever to get me out of that situation. So I'm going to be able to do that next time for myself.
I love that. I love that. It reminds me of when I was in high school. One of my absolute favorite mentors, I had just had a little girl. And while her kids were grown, she had two kids. Her oldest son was just super affectionate, loved everybody, wanted to be underneath, just all the closeness, all the yumminess. And she would precede her daughter, like anytime anyone was like going out to an event, gonna hang out together,
Yeah.
would precede it with, okay, she is shy and isn't going to engage with you as much,
Right.
like she might not talk to you and it's okay. And like kind of just setting up like it's not like that's just how she's
How
being
she,
human,
yeah.
right? Has nothing to do with you, with any of that. That's
Yeah.
how she's being human, period.
And we're going to let her be.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We did get another question in the
Yeah.
chat. What is a book that you can recommend that supports that parenting style?
So off top, I don't have the name of it. There's we used to have an account called Sex Positive Parenting on Instagram, and they took it down, unfortunately. But there is a person that I look to. Her name is Melissa, blanking on her last name, but she is on Instagram as Sex Positive Families. And she does have a lot of book recommendations that I would recommend. So following her account will sort of open the gates to other resources. I also think that there is not, I also think, I also know that looking at things like gentle parenting, I follow a couple of those providers or experts online, really have helped. I feel like if you could use some of the gentle parenting approaches, it will allow you to talk about a lot of different topics with your children. I think sometimes, again, we put a lot of weight on sex and sexuality. And oftentimes our general approach to parenting is like, do your children have a voice in your household?
Oh,
Right. So if they have a voice in the household in general, then they're going to have a voice on all kinds of topics. Right. Are we prioritizing how our children feel? And if we're prioritizing how our children feel about eating dinner, right, and coming up with alternative plans or what have you, then we could probably prioritize how our children feel about unwanted touch or, privacy and things of that sort. So, I, definitely like zone in on the sex positive parenting, because I think there's some real like acute tips that can be had. But you can also broaden and think about your general parenting style. And I like to think about this the same way for adults. We don't become disrespectful only around sex. When it comes to, do we respect other people, our power dynamics, do we, how do we interact with other people? It's probably going to be indicative of how we're going to treat people in a more intimate space. I like to say, like, predators don't just attack from that one particular point of view. Usually there's some style of grooming, or there's crossing some boundaries early on in the date, or what have you, that are indicators. So, I like to sort of look at human behavior and how it leads to issues around sex and sexuality, not just zeroing in on that part. So it's, again, like, when I just want to talk about keeping our children safe from a sex positive standpoint. If I'm teaching my children how to have a voice early on, if I'm teaching my children that our household is a safe environment where they can talk to me about anything that makes them uncomfortable or anything that makes them excited, then I am not leaving it. I'm not leaving sex off the table, or I'm not leaving someone making them feel uncomfortable off the table,
Right. That's a big one. I mean, like, are they having a voice and are they being heard?
Yes. Yes.
Like that, receiving and understanding like what's going on, especially from the child's point of view. It can be difficult. It can take a little extra. And also it's so valuable because like to be heard, even for us, it's like it's magical. It's like, oh my God. Like
And think about it, right? When we're heard about small things or anything, then when the big stuff comes up, we know it's a safe place. So when we can sort of model to our children, like, I want to give you, I hear you, or do you have any questions? I'm taking this time out to answer your questions. I'm curious about your questions. I'm curious about what you think. Then they can bring the hard stuff. If we go like, I don't want to hear anything, I say, go upstairs, clean your room, don't talk about nothing, keep your mouth shut, don't do this. Now talk to me about sex and sexuality.
thank you.
Yeah.
Deal with that shit.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. No, that's so real. And that safety that you're talking about, like that didn't even occur for me, but it's true. Being able to speak into someone's listening and know that it's going to land in a safe and secure way versus whatever else comes up. That's a profound difference. This is something. So I was thinking back to your second daughter and like the book and the like.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's such a powerful way to support someone in sexuality and creating that level of autonomy. My mom did the exact same thing to me. Like, I don't know that it came with a book, but one day she was like, when it comes to sexuality, you can ask me anything. And she said that. And then I sat there for a minute and it was just kind of like whenever. And I was like, okay, I had never asked a single question, but I studied my ass off. I wanted to know. I was curious. I wanted to look. If ever I had to ask a question, I wanted to at least know what I was talking about. And it was really empowering to know that like I had that space.
Yeah. And like, this is a okay thing for you to be knowing about. Right.
Right.
I also used to put, I have a couple of books I have. They're okay, actually, to the person who asked that. There's the American Girls book on the care of my body. It was called Taking Care of My Body. And they have an American Boys one too. I put those at the time. That was sort of like, we didn't have as many as much resources as we do now. I used to put those in the bathroom. I have one like taking care of your girls, and it's about breast care. That's in the bathroom now. I have a feelings book in the kids' bathroom, and I just like put them in different places. And I know that they read it because it gets moved around. I can see the creases in the book. Some of them have worksheets, and then I've seen it like come out of the bathroom and into the room. So, and I'll say to them, I'll say like, oh, I noticed that you've been picking up a couple pages out of that book. Like, do you have any questions? What do you think about it?
Mhm.
There are some challenges with those books in terms of like not addressing things around other types of presentations of like the American Girls book is very like heteronormative, et cetera, et cetera. I didn't see at the time a lot of representation of Black little girls and stuff. So, we got a ways to go, but I mean, things are changing.
I just have to check in that American Girl book that you talking about. Are we talking about like the dolls?
Yep.
The Are you?
Yep.
All right,
Mhm.
some of y'all might be too young. They might still be around. I don't know. I'm
They
not
are. They
sure.
are still around.
Are they still equally as racist?
They've changed. They have more colors. They don't have, I don't think they have a girl with locks or yeah, no.
Okay.
That's okay. No,
That
the cool thing is that there are other doll companies by people of color that are
yeah.
getting into the market, but that American Girl market is like, that's tight. They got American Boys also, but it is definitely still catering to a particular type of presentation for boys and girls, and
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. That's a whole other episode, and we're not
yeah.
going to go there. But it's real. But I do love the fact that that's a resource. That
Right.
they actually have these resources for children that are age appropriate.
Mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm,
oh,
mm-hmm.
what was that book? My Name is Polka Dot. That's a good one on gender.
Is it
It
okay?
is. Oh my God. A friend of mine had it for her daughter, and it just kind of went through and talked about the different ways that you could identify, and like how it
Nice.
doesn't have to be the same from day to day. You have the freedom of expression.
I want to talk about that real fast, Nika, if that's okay with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is something. So also new style parenting, newer, is that we were not raised to have conversations about people's sexual orientation. It's sort of something that like just flies under the radar, and when that person is ready to share that, they can share it, but they got to go through that whole journey on their own, and they got
Mhm.
to go through that journey with you, like putting all of these heteronormative expectations on them. So it's like, when are
Yep.
you gonna have a little boyfriend, or and it's like, okay, we're not even making any room for a different answer.
Right.
And
Right.
so with our children, we have and continue to ask, what are your pronouns? Have your pronouns changed? um what type of people are you attracted to? Has that changed? Right. Your relationship style, are y'all still monogamous? Are things getting more serious? What does more serious means? You going up there to college, there's going to be a lot of people for you to choose from. Have you and your partner talked about that? And sometimes we get like, for the first time I asked about pronouns, my middle daughter told me, she said, I'm a toaster. And we were just like, what does that mean? She was like, I don't know. Right. And so it was like, okay. And we literally called her that. We would be like, our oldest daughter, our toaster, our son. And she would just like roll her eyes or whatever. But it was sort of her way of saying, I'm not, I'm not what you think, or
Mhm.
I'm not what people expect, but don't ask me. I'm not ready to share that with you.
Right.
Or it doesn't matter. Right. I'm a toaster. What does that mean? It shouldn't matter. And she was right. Like, it doesn't. I was just trying to be like, I'm trying to be inclusive here. I'm trying to figure out what to what to yell when I need somebody to come and wash the dishes.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but just asking, allow conversation for us to be like, ah, that's a different answer. And then like a couple months later, like, hey, are you still a toaster? And she's like, I'm using she, her, they. I'm like, okay, cool. And now it is she and they. Um, with our little one, he's had said things like, I want a green dress. Okay, we bought him a green dress. It's still sitting up in the closet. He don't want to wear it, but we let him know, like, if this is what you want, we'll support it because it's no skin off our back. The only skin off my back is if you bought it, I would like you to wear it because now we are wasting money. But luckily now there's another little one, so if he outgrows it, maybe she'll want it. So just asking and inviting other conversations with the one that's gone off. Well, actually, both of them. What's your relationship style now?
Right.
My oldest daughter is like, "Manana, what are you know, like, I I'm like, okay, checking. She's like, I'm not like you, mom. Okay, I get it. I'm just checking. But again, it's like giving that sort of permission that if things change, this is a place where we could talk about it because I'm already inviting the conversation. My middle one told me, we know that we're too young to be super serious. And when we get to college, we want to kind of like make things like give ourselves options. I'm like, okay, cool. That's great. Here's some different relationship styles that y'all can look into. So I think also when we're talking about sex and sexuality, that we're not only talking about sex, we're also talking about intimacy and relating, right? And how you see yourself. And we can invite those conversations simply by just checking in with our kids. I notice a bunch of people are saying are waving different flags now, like which flag will represent where you fall, which color on the flag. I said, oh, they updated the LGBTQIA flag. Which colors you repping? And she'd be like, all of them. And I'm like, okay. There's stuff already out there for us to grab, to latch onto and just invite our children to talk with us about it.
I love that you created it as an invitation. And the way that you're phrasing and framing the questions is so, it makes it accessible. Like relationship style is not that's not a phrase. It's not common.
It's not. It's like, do you got a little boyfriend, right? That's the way that, that we've always been. Or are you dating someone?
Right. It's about status. Yeah, it's not about style. It's like, where do you fall on that single, not single status? And there are so many ways to relationship.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's beautiful. So hats off. And I love Toaster. That makes me happy.
I love it.
Sorry, now I'm stuck on all the different pronoun expressions and the flags.
No problem.
Let's see. All right. So we have a comment in the chat. It's interesting how librarians in school are being attacked for having books in the library that allow children to explore. The Parents' Right Movement.org.
Or maybe
Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
But that is, the different types of erasure that are happening, especially around body autonomy. Like that.
Absolutely. It is frightening. It's even more of a reason why as parents, we have to fill in the gaps. I mean, we've seen this in a lot of different ways. And so for the folks that are privileged enough to feel like this is the first attack on their children's comprehensive education, I want to share like sort of what that experience has been like. I know we are talking about like critical race theory as well right now, about history being revised and information being taken out of schools, but it was barely there to begin with. So we already have the experience of what it's like not being represented in education. And what that means, it means that we have to double down and educate our children at home. and put them in the, places and spaces within community where they can get that kind of discourse, the exposure to information. For those of us that have been a part of the LGBTQIA community, I mean, there hasn't been a time where that type of education has been made available to our children. So what have we had to do? Build community and expose our children in a way that is, healthy and age appropriate and comprehensive for them in that way. So I do think that those parents who are just like, we're relying on the school system to be there for them in terms of sex education, health and wellness, you're going to have to take a page from other stigmatized communities book where we do it ourselves, or we rely on other people in our tribe to do that. We also, have seen them take away art and music,
Right.
physical education. Like, we've seen this model before and we know it doesn't work, right? Where children need something and they need it in a structured way at a particular time and presented in a particular way, and we've seen it taken away and the outcomes that it's had. And those communities that have done the best in this case, in these type of scenarios, have provided supplemental education, supplemental experiences for those children. So, it's scary, it's very frustrating, it's very as the person said, but we can rely on other models, where we have to be the ones to offer it to our children, because we cannot rely on our government to see it as important, useful, or see our children as worth having this.
Yeah, 100%, and just getting like where the responsibility lies, and also how we can take ownership in the shift, because you're right, it's always going to change. Like, I always say, like, every 50 years or so something new is going to happen, and in the school system every 5 at most. Like, it's constantly rapidly changing.
Right.
All right, do you have any other resources, information that you want to share about the work that you're doing in the world? Oh, go ahead. You go.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'll let you make that special announcement. I'm there. So we are continuing to provide workshops and consultations, specifically around sex positive parenting. We also do workshops and consultations around porn and parenting, specifically around porn literacy, as well as being sex workers and sex work families, and also parents, and sort of destigmatizing that and normalizing sex workers having families. I feel like the more we can get that out, the more we can mitigate, educators, social workers, medical providers from having a bias towards our families. Like, serve our families, please, assess our families for wellness, but don't have a bias. Always, if there is children that are in any type of risk, like, I am like, I do want the people there. Like, I want the resources. I want people to be critical of all parents, and making sure that children are being brought up in the healthiest environment as possible. But I want that to be done without the bias of us being sex workers. So that we are continuing to do that work. We are fetish trainers, so we are taking lots of groups around the world on these different retreats to have some quality times and safe space to explore their fetishes. So you can check out our website, Jet-Setting Jasmine, for more on that. Also, we are continuing to challenge the representation of people of color in kink. That is referenced in our films on Royal Fetish XXX.com. Yeah, we just out here spreading the good word. And there is something very special that I would love for you to announce.
Okay, y'all. Jasmine is also going to be a part of the Global Sexual Health and Freedom Summit.
Yes.
Very excited. Oh my God. The 4th and the 5th in February. And Jasmine, you're going to be doing a few different wonderful special conversations. Would you like to share just a bit on those?
Yeah, so I know King and I so we don't have a working title yet. We don't have a working title. Go ahead. I'll let you give as much information as you think is appropriate right now.
Oh my God.
I know
Well,
one of them for sure that I'm super, super excited, and this one is fresh out the bag. This one does have a title, Aging Kinky as Fuck, so AKA. And we will be talking about sexual pleasure as we age. We are not talking about it from a disordered standpoint. We are not talking about it from anything other than we have the right, the audacity, and we also have, the and should have the space to continue to explore our kinks, our fetishes, our sex, sexuality, our pleasure as we continue to age over the continuum, and how the society around us can support that and normalize that. I want to say King and I are bringing a more involved workshop around sex positive parenting, and so you'll be able to hear a dad perspective, and how we do this in partnership and in tandem. And also, like, some of the things that I think are like really cool and profound about our kids, he doesn't, and he has his own story. So, like, getting a more robust feel for what it is to have a porn and parenting conversation.
Yes, yes, yes. I cannot wait. It's going to
I'm
be very, very exciting. And I know the AKA part, I'm like, okay, we got that happening. Oh my God. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I am so looking forward to the summit and getting all the just yummy juiciness, y'all. You do not understand how incredibly powerful this woman is. Like, oh my God. Oh my God. Anything she says, hang on to every word. Love you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And shout out to Betty in the background.
Yes. Okay, everybody, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is the It Cast, Real Talk on Sex, our community outreach podcast that increases diversity and conversations on health and sexuality. Through this work, we are creating a world where all people feel loved, honored, and respected.